Start by getting down like this. I need to lower my level of confidence. Speaking about unity today, and I just love that topic, because unity, of course, comes from the term unit, meaning one. And that is so simple, and it reminds me of Taoism. The Tao Te Ching says, the Tao is the simplest idea, and yet no one understands it. And of course, that was written before I came along. But you know, the concept again is very simple. Unity, we're all one. Everything is one. I mean, this is obvious to us. Look around us. Everything is one. Well, of course, if you look around you, everything doesn't appear to be one at all. Everything seems to be totally separate. So why is that if it's one? And of course, it has to do with our physical reality and the way we've developed. For whatever reason, evolutionarily, we've developed to experience a very, very small part of the reality that's around us. We get our experiences, of course, from the intake of our senses. And if you think about that, our senses are very limited. Take sound. I mean, sound, the vibration of air, we all hear it, and we think, well, yeah, we hear all of the sounds until, say, you blow on a dog whistle. And to us, a person would look foolish up here going, and no sound comes out. But of course, to a dog, sound does come out, and they hear it. And the reality is that there are sound waves, we're just not designed to take them in. Light is the same way. I mean, we look around and we say, well, we see everything around us, but we see light waves, electromagnetic waves, within a very narrow field. And outside of that, there's things like ultraviolet, there's infrared. You know, some animals, like some snakes, actually see infrared, which is heat. We don't see that. Radio waves. We can look at a tower, we'll see the radio tower. We don't see radio waves. There's no reason we couldn't. They're the same thing as light waves are. They just vibrate a little differently. So what we know is that there's this whole reality out there, and we're just designed to experience physically a very small part of it. So what is that whole reality out there? Well, we know, of course, what it is that we're made. Everything around us is made out of molecules. Molecules are made out of atoms. Atoms are made out of electrons, which are energy. Protons, which are made out of quarks, protons and neutrons, which are a form of energy. And so everything here is just some various form of energy. And let's look at that a different way. We're made to a great extent out of complex atoms. Oxygen, carbon, iron, those sorts of things. Those atoms are basically made in only one place, inside stars. That's where they come from. When stars explode or when they blow out their outer layers, those molecules go on, form planets, become people. Those are formed inside stars primarily from hydrogen. Hydrogen, the very basic atom. The stars were around for many of them, let's say, as early as 13 billion years ago. They were formed from hydrogen. Before hydrogen became stars, it was just loose. That's all you had was a proton and an electron. And you go back to within about 3 minutes of the Big Bang, you have no hydrogen, they hadn't come together yet, you just have protons. You go back another few minutes, the protons aren't formed yet, because they formed from energy. And within about the first minute of existence, there were 4 types of energy: gravity, electromagnetic, the weak force, the strong force. And you go back within a few fractions of a second, all of those are one energy. And so, the only thing that started this universe is one type of energy, and everything that's here now is that in just a different manifestation? But that's physically, that's chemically. What about as human beings, as living creatures? Well, we've all heard this, you are what you eat. Our mothers told us that when we wanted to eat candy bars and they wanted us to eat something healthy. You are what you eat. Well, you are what you eat, and you drink and you breathe. And what we eat basically comes from the ground. Now, you might prefer meat from cows that eat grass that come from the ground, or you eat the vegetable itself that comes from the ground. But what is it that they come from? And of course, there's inorganic molecules and atoms there, but there's a great deal of what we would call organic, life in effect molecules, which come from billions of years of plants and animals existing, dying, decomposing back into the ground. Trees, moss, dinosaurs, alligators, early people. They were all there. They all passed away, went back into the ground, became the molecules that come up and become us when we eat this stuff. And so we are literally eating the atoms of all of those earlier creatures, and that's what we're made of. We drink water. Where does that water come from? Well, it doesn't just come from the sea air. Those same atoms or molecules of water have been around for centuries. It may start in the oasis in the Gobi Desert and be drank by a camel, and it becomes that camel's blood. And pretty soon passes on through the camel, it evaporates, goes up in clouds, rains down on the ocean, is taken in by a whale. The whale has it, eventually expels it. It is pulled up in a hurricane, dumped on the East Coast. A bird drinks it. It flies over into the middle of the United States. The bird eventually passes away. The water goes back into the soil, down a creek, down to the Mississippi River, evaporates again, comes into a cloud, rains on the Sierra, and flows down here, and we drink it. And that happens over and over and over and over, millions of times. And the water we're drinking are all of those things. The air you breathe, that you go in and you take in, that same air has been breathed for hundreds of thousands to millions of years. And all of these creatures have breathed that air in and out. Slaves working in Egypt, the Buddha, they've studied the actual patterns of the way air works in the air that you're breathing in. Some of that would have been breathed in by Buddha. We take that into our bodies. That is what we are. Everything that exists. But what about in our human lives? What about in our everyday lives? Yes, okay, so we can say chemically, physically connected, but in our lives, let me tell you about a man who lived way down in Africa, in a tribe that really had isolated itself, did everything it can to stay away from people and still lived a very primitive existence. And a man got in an argument with his wife. In primitive existence, that happens too. And he usually went out hunting. He usually went out hunting with her brothers, his brother-in-laws, but he didn't feel good about it. He decides to go out and hunt by himself, and he's mad. He's going to leave right now. He goes out and makes just a very basic camp for himself. He gets up the next morning to go hunting, but he's upset, and he doesn't take care of things well, and he's not thinking things through. Leaves that fire on a little bit. A wind comes up and takes those sparks and starts a fire in the savannah that spreads. Huge smoke, huge hot air coming up till the fire finally goes down to the river and burns out. But this huge expanse of heat and hot air going up changes the wind patterns. And the wind patterns would usually go through the land up Africa into Asia Minor. But because of this huge fire that's changed that a little bit, it goes over the water more at this time of year. It wouldn't normally do that. And goes into Southeast Asia. And you have a woman whose husband passed away. She's working in a garment factory, horrendously long hours, trying to support she and her children. And that day, even though it wouldn't normally happen then, pours down raining. Because the wind patterns have been changed. And she goes in, but she feels horrible, she's soaked, she's cold, but she has to work or her kids are going to starve. She doesn't get paid if she doesn't work. And so she works in this garment factory, but she doesn't do quite as good a work, you know. And several months later, there's a man working in a factory in Illinois, and he's making wiper blades, the ones you use after your original ones are done. So these are the alternate wiper blades that you put on. And he drops it to him, he bends down, and his pants rip. Because they weren't made quite so well. And he's real embarrassed, and he stands up and he looks around. And, you know, it's not too bad. It's down in between the legs, so he can go on. But in that process, he's missed tightening that rubber blade well on one of those wiper blades. And then 6 months later, the Most Reverend Bob Hand, driving on Highway 41 in a rainstorm, is significantly lowering his spiritual level by cussing out a wiper blade that is defective because a man in Illinois split his pants because a woman in Bangladesh was sick when she was trying to do the work, because she got rained on, because this tribesman didn't put out his fire because he got in an argument with his wife. Those connections happen constantly. We do not see it, but that's what our life is made of. So we know that chemically and physically as creatures and in our lives we're connected, but that's not what we're here to hear about. I just thought I'd say all that. Spiritually is what we want to know. Spiritually, are we one? And of course we know we are because we sing it all the time. Angie talked about that last time. We are one. Stephen gets to sing when I just have to talk, so I thought I would do an a cappella rap version of We Are One for you. Until Jean heard me do it and absolutely forbade it. So I'll just talk about we are one. We know this, we say it, it's all God, but we come from a history. Come on, we all do. Our very culture is based on it. Judaism, Christianity, Islam says that our souls are made by God, but they're made separate. We each have individual souls that for eternity remain separate from God. And we can go to hell or we can go to heaven, be in purgatory. For eternity, separate souls from God. Now, are we willing to give that up? Are we willing to say, when we transition on, this individual is gone and now we're just experiencing the oneness? And yet there's lots of examples of people apparently experiencing an interaction with someone who has made their transition and appears to be interacting as an individual soul. Now, this doesn't lend itself well to scientific exploration. Unless there's somebody here who wants to make their transition right now and tell us about it, it's probably not a practical solution. So, how do we do it? And I looked at this and I thought, science does give us the answer, though, because science is based on a very strict logic. And what that very strict logic has found out in the deepest aspects of reality is that the universe does not follow that very strict logic. Because things can be mass and energy at the same time. Two different things. Things can be in two places